Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy was a cinematic triumph across the board. The set design, the music, the cinematography, the quality of the original source material. But I think it's also a great example of perfect casting. For the entire Fellowship and most of the supporting characters, they're cast to a T, so much so that seeing them in other projects can sometimes feel weird, as they belong in Middle-earth. But of all the performances, one stands out as the most unforgettable, the most irreplaceable, the most iconic. And that title belongs to Andy Serkis as Gollum. Serkis came from a theatre background and was starting to work his way into television and film. He was clearly dedicated to his craft, having learned to play the violin from scratch for Mike Leigh's Topsy-Turvy, even though it never ended up being used on screen. However, despite being a jobbing actor, he was far from a household name. It was at the age of 36 that he took on the role of a lifetime as Gollum in The Lord of the Rings, a role that he initially wasn't very interested in, as up until that point, playing a CG character just meant you were never seen or on set, and Serkis never really considered himself the type of voice actor that could do impressions or mimicry.
Lord of the Rings has got, a dozen really good parts in it. Can you not get me up for something decent? I'm not a voice actor, and I don't really want to do a voice for a digital character.
But little did he know that this new technology, motion capture, now known as performance capture, would allow him to create one of the most iconic performances of all time. Now, of course, a lot of the credit goes to Peter Jackson, Weta Digital, and even Tolkien himself. It does feel somewhat bizarre to hand Serkis all the credit for a performance that involved hundreds of people working tireless hours to fully imagine. However, Serkis undeniably brought an intense energy to this performance that really added to the texture of the piece. And Gollum, as a character, is actually one of the most crucial to get right, as he's the physical manifestation of the power of the ring. Without his haunting desperation and physical obsession, we only have word of mouth or occasional reactions from Frodo to show the burden of the ring, and thus the weight and responsibility our protagonist's shoulders. So Gollum sets the stakes for the audience as he symbolizes what Frodo could potentially become the longer he holds on to the ring. In Jungian terms, he's Frodo's shadow. From what I can tell, there are 3 keys to understanding what makes Andy Serkis' performance so captivating. The vocal range in the performance, the physicality of the character, and showcasing the internal battle of addiction. Let's start with the vocal range of the performance. Serkis felt that Gollum's pain and guilt resided in his throat and wanted to perform some sort of involuntary spasm to show the agony he felt without the ring. It was at this moment his cat walked into the room and began coughing up furballs, and something clicked in Serkis' mind. This gag reflex really highlighting the sickness of the character and inducing a feeling of revulsion in the viewer. Serkis mastered not only the vocal range, but the complete audio experience of Gollum. It's a slithering, saliva-soaked performance. The way he speaks, the excessive S's, it all evokes so many different feelings and memories. The breathing is almost like E.T. But it's also clearly purring like a cat. But beyond that, the constrained way air escapes his lungs in such a raspy tone is reminiscent of smoke expelling from a witch's cauldron, which works so well as there is a spell cast over him, the spell of the ring. Serkis employs a wide range of vocal tones, the high-pitched, gentle Smeagol side,
Smeagol's free!
And the vicious, saliva-spitting Gollum side.
Master betrayed us. Wicked, tricksy, false.
It's hard to imagine what the other actors who auditioned for the role tried, but I think it's safe to say it's nowhere near this level of authenticity.
It hurts us!
Don't listen to him, Fred. He's trying to trick us.
There's so much depth to this performance. It feels real. the hissing and the haunting squealing sounds that have come to define his character. Despite not considering himself a voice actor going into the audition, it seems Serkis delivered such a complete vocal experience that even if they somewhat screwed up the animation, the performance would still be exceptional. Unsurprisingly, Serkis was later asked to record the audiobook for Lord of the Rings, as no one else could do it justice.
Then we shall be Master Gollum.
Next is the physicality of the character. Although he started off just wearing an embarrassing white costume and acting in the scenes alongside the other actors, as the production progressed, so did the technology. And by the end, Serkis had motion sensors all over his body and even 964 control points on his face to capture every little detail of his performance. Even Serkis's eyes look like Gollum's, so you can see how the little nuances in his expressions made it into the final animation. When we first meet Gollum, he's crawling down to Frodo and Sam. The effects team did an amazing job of making him look like all skin and bone, but there's a creepy crawliness to his movement, like a spider. This is where Serkis's theatre background comes into play, as in theatre, acting tends to be bigger, more exaggerated, so even someone in the back row can physically feel the character's reactions. And whether he's lashing out, joyfully battering a fish, writhing in pain, or pulling Frodo out of the water, there's a unique physicality to the character. Then we come to showcasing the internal battle of addiction. Tolkien and Peter Jackson deserve heavy credit here, as the character is a beautiful representation of the weakness of man. But Serkis takes it to another level, consciously bringing in the psychology of an addict.
So I started to think about along the terms of him being like a heroin addict or a cocaine, like someone who is obsessed by something, and unless they get it, they're going to go crazy.
His most famous scene illustrates the internal conflict of Smeagol and how his dark side, his addicted side, Gollum, berates him, beating him down mentally to lure him back in, capturing the tragic reality of any human bound by an addiction out of their control.
I hate you.
Being tugged away from the version of you who you want to be, like you're in a toxic relationship with yourself, a slave to your own impulses. Serkis manages to capture the emotional despair of the character, which is vitally important to gain the audience's sympathy and empathy. Let's examine two of my favourite scenes in greater detail, as they really showcase all three of these keys in action. Okay, so let's just note how many different sides to the character are on display in this scene. First, he's joyfully singing along. Then he's devouring the fish, even spitting to make the character more repulsive. Then as Frodo tries to entice him away, we see skepticism in his expression and his eyes. Then he follows on his hands and knees, like a dog staring up at his master, the fish hanging from his mouth like an animal, purring the whole time. You can feel the loyalty and adoration in his eyes. As he's captured, we then feel his humanity through his expression, the pain of the betrayal as he squeals,
Master!
which is phenomenal writing. He doesn't say, "You betrayed me," or "How could you?" He just pleads, "Master," reminding Frodo of the role he was meant to play and the trust he had given him. One word says it all. Then we cut to the wild, frantic movement of Serkis as he struggles and fights with the guards. Then he turns his back to us, so there are no more facial expressions. It's purely body language and the vocal performance from here. Now this is masterful. Notice how as Gollum takes over Smeagol, Serkis starts to rub his own shoulder, physically manifesting the other persona, soothing him, seducing him back to the dark side. It's like we're watching a one-man play taking place. No other actor or character does this throughout the trilogy. And then the scene closes with the screech.
Precious!
Tell me there is another actor alive who can perform this line this well. Salivating, slithering, purring, bitter desperation, pain, wrath. It's all right here in just one sequence. The final scene of The Two Towers is another almost Shakespearean monologue, reminiscent of the famous Hitchcock quote, "If it's a good movie, the sound could go off, and the audience would still have a perfectly clear idea of what was going on. So based on Serkis's body language alone, we're going to be taken on an emotional journey as he turns on the two hobbits. We start off with Smeagol clearly plagued with the idea of hurting his master, collapsing, crying, pleading, desperate, weak. Then suddenly his head snaps up in anger as Gollum tries to argue with him, but he remains feeble. Then the argument becomes more intense, standing up strong, an intimidating gorilla-like strut, then grips the tree to emulate wringing their necks, followed by a psychotic, murderous crawl across the floor, looking back with spite. Then he starts physically pitching the idea to us, as well as Smeagol, of how we're just a few steps away from getting our hands on the ring. He's not just visualizing, he's fantasizing. Thoughts are turning into action. It's becoming more real. An immediate collapse into weakness, expressions of sadness, doubt, fear. We can't do this because of Sam. So Gollum pitches killing Sam, and now we see the temptation, the unreserved joy in his expression. And this scene really highlights the sneakiness of addiction. Throughout the story, we've seen Smeagol try to overcome the power of the ring, and Gollum just keeps chipping away at him, trying different techniques to get him to break. And up until right now, he had failed, when he finally finds a weakness to exploit, his hatred for Sam. That's the key that unlocks the door. He's giving himself permission to do whatever it takes. And now, seduced by Gollum's emotional manipulation, he's back serving his addiction. But Smeagol is still scared, says it's too risky, and Gollum closes with the final pitch, a sneaky idea seducing his mind, which Serkis shows us by dragging his eyes across the screen as he says, "We could let her do it," relieving Smeagol of the risk of getting caught and the responsibility of killing, and then combining it with the temptation of being reunited with his true love. One scene, one actor, delivering a monologue between two characters that both live inside him, and we can see it in every detail, not just in his face, but his body language, how he's physically touching everything. What makes this performance so special is that you genuinely forget you're watching a CG character, and that's down to Serkis, Jackson, and Weta Digital. When you think of Gollum, you don't think of the technology, or even Serkis, you think of the character as if he's a real person. After Lord of the Rings, it seemed as if motion capture was going to be a new unstoppable trend. However, despite there being numerous movies that utilize the same technology, 20 years later, nothing has even come close to topping Andy Serkis's portrayal of Gollum. A spellbinding performance that we never anticipated, and after viewing, could simply never forget. If you enjoy content like this and want to see more of it, please do consider supporting me on Patreon, as it really does make a difference to how much content I can pump out. Or if you can't afford that, then simply like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment down below to help the algorithm do its thing.